As we kick off our new chapter on the Age of Exploration, we're first going to talk a little bit about the different advancements in exploration in terms of technology and tools that really allowed Europeans to start to explore the unknown world. And a big reason for these advancements came from the Renaissance. Right. And remember, we talked a little bit about the Renaissance from last chapter, meaning rebirth. And it was a different time in Europe for scholars to start to go back to ancient writings of the Romans and the Greeks, their art, their written pieces, and kind of start to explore new ideas that for a long time had been lost. And it kind of sparked new inventions and new philosophies to come about. And with that, we also began to see new changes in exploration. And there were some major tools that were brought about through the Renaissance that really added to the age of exploration starting in Europe. One of those things was the magnetic compass, right? This definitely improved the safety and the efficiency of ocean travel by helping sailors have a better idea of determining direction in which way they were headed. The astrolabe was something that was actually created by the ancient Greeks and once again was revisited by the Europeans, where now sailors could determine the direction by being able to measure distances of the sun and the stars. So it was like an ancient GPS system, right? It helped with navigation and being able to chart where they were and where they were headed. Sailors also began to understand more about the sea itself and the ocean currents and how they worked. They discovered that the North Atlantic current, which is that current that moves from Europe to the Caribbean, moves in a clockwise direction, while as the South Atlantic current between Africa and South America moves in a counterclockwise direction. Why is that important? Because of the fact by understanding these currents, it also prevented sailors from being swept out into the middle of nowhere, swept out to sea if they were caught in one of these currents and didn't know where they were headed. So, one big motivation as to why these advancements began and why exploration became so important, a lot of it had to do with trading, right? Especially because of the Crusades during the Middle Ages that first sparked trade between Europe and Asia and the Middle East. And at this time, their main way to trade with each other was by land, right? Through the Silk Road is how they were able to get all of these goods and trade with each other by traveling the Silk Road. Now, that also meant that it was a very long journey. Things became very expensive because of that, because it had to travel so many thousands of miles by land and traveling over different people who were trading and then retrading it and retrading it. So price and cost would go up. So the Europeans really wanted to find a better way to trade with Asia and the Middle East. They figured that if they could find a sea route to India, it would be quicker and cheaper than having to depend on the Silk Road. This also would open the door to finding more people that they can convert to Christianity, because remember, the church is still a very powerful force within Europe. And just the curiosity about learning more about Asia and its different cultures was another motivation for Europeans to start finding new ways to explore. Prince Henry the Navigator was a big supporter of this age of exploration. A lot of his money was spent on trying to make Portugal a very important nation within exploration. He built an observatory to be able to learn more about the stars and using that to chart navigation courses. He founded a school of navigation to teach that to sailors. He financed a lot of research by map makers so we could have more accurate maps and start to find better ships to be able to explore. One of those ships that he created or helped create because of his funding and his school was the caravel, which became the common ship that most European sailors used. And the caravel was now smaller and lighter, much easier to steer than the older ships. The triangular sails on the caravel allowed the ships to sail into the wind, which allowed them to be able to sail along the coastline better, and they could explore those coastlines, which also made map making better and more accurate because map makers were able to see a better figure of the landforms to be able to create their maps. So Henry the Navigator was definitely a very important person in developing all of these tools needed to kind of spark the age of exploration. So in order to get these sea routes to India, that was the goal. There are two main explorers, Portuguese explorers, that we refer to. The first one was Bartolomeu Dias, which he in 1487 was able to sail his ship right from Europe. So this would be here, Lisbon, the capital of Portugal. He would sail it along the coastline of Africa, and he reached the tip, which a storm actually took his ship to the tip of Africa quite by chance. And that's why he called it the Cape of Good Hope, because he figured that hopefully by going around this cape, he would eventually make it to India. But that would fall to Vasco da Gama, who in 1497 actually went ahead and sailed around the Cape of Good Hope, and eventually of May 1498 did reach Calcutta, India, for Portugal then actually winning that race, and Portugal now became the first country to find a sea route to India, and opening Asia to trade by sea. And that also made Lisbon, now at the capital city of Portugal, very, very wealthy, and brought in a lot of money to the Portuguese nation, with opening all of this trade. That at first they only had the west coast of Africa where they could trade things like gold, ivory, and slaves, but now they opened up Asia to be able to trade even more things like spices that were so expensive. So Portugal from this really became extremely wealthy from it.